Hi everyone, this is Jen, and today I have a deep feeling in me that because this beautiful gentleman sitting right next to me is such a gem to this world. And I don't know how I'm exactly going to introduce him because he has a lot to share. So this is Gregory Vahanian. He's a transformational coach, life coach. He helps women and men to really embrace a lot more healing on different levels and their empowerment, so they get to really enjoy and create their fulfillment in life. Yeah, I think that's how I really want to start to introduce you this way. But hello, beautiful
Hello,
gentleman here.
hello, beautiful woman.
I'm so happy to have you here because I deeply
Mm,
respect your work and
mm,
your presence, your presence.
mm, mm.
Yeah, so Gregory, I would love to have you share your own transformational journey with everyone here because there's so much juicing there, so much. And feel free to start from anywhere that just kind of pop up for you, would you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for the sweet invitation. I've enjoyed all of our conversations and following your work, uh, the excerpt from your chapter in the book that you recently did, and your blog posts and videos as well. And so it's been a treat getting to know you and also getting to know one of your sisters. So far.
Grace.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So my journey, I think I associated, I know that for each of us, our journeys go back certainly to our childhood, and depending upon how we hold or relate to the idea of being spiritual beings having a human experience, perhaps entertaining the idea that we are eternal souls that may have more than one human experience. So when did my so we could go back lifetimes, but I'm going to cut to about 30 years ago.
Beautiful.
So in addition to being a transformational life coach, I have a martial arts background and I have an acting background. Been a professional actor for 30 years, done film, television, theater, and so on. And I came to California from New York, where I grew up, on a film that I was shooting in Texas and Arizona.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of enthusiasm. I was beginning to be received, and I was beginning to be seen.
Mm.
And, and it seems like the more, not just for me, but with the clients I work with and my observation of how this works, the more we allow ourselves to be seen, the more it seems things that are unresolved in our consciousness, where there may be pockets of shame or pockets of trauma that have been unprocessed or metabolized, will tend to surface as part of the dance between moving forward in physical world reality and moving forward in the ascension of this mountain of light, or this mountain of consciousness that we all seem to be, awakening in our self-realization. So for me, all of a sudden, a lot of shame started showing up.
Wow.
And I started to have nightmarish, frightening images related to trauma I had experienced as a kid. And at a certain point, so I began meditation. I began a meditation practice to start with intuitively. I didn't have this language at the time, but intuitively, I knew that I needed to cultivate the neutral observer in me to be able to observe my thoughts, the images, the emotions, the fear, anxiety, without getting involved or attached or identified.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So that was a time when you started meditating. That was a time when you were in the martial art arena, or you were already an actor?
I was already an actor. So I had grown up doing meditation as part of my karate training since I was
Yes.
13.
Yeah.
But I had done it in the context of really getting quiet, really getting centered, really moving into sort of warrior mode as a martial artist. In what I had not, so I had done a kind of meditation for years already at that point. But what I had not done is I had not brought the discipline of the courage and the warrior spirit that I brought and that was awakened and cultivated through martial arts. I had not brought it to the arena of my consciousness work. In a way, I had navigated the pain of some early childhood trauma by becoming a fighter and by channeling that energy and cultivating a sense that I would survive and prevail over the trauma, but I hadn't dealt with the trauma.
Because that was back in times of full contact karate, right?
Yeah.
So I imagine it's really intense for you to just like exert all those power and force, you know, to let out. And I'm so curious, and I would love you to share, like, from that point of your life, like being like in that masculine, like, you know, energy to just let it all out, through that to your actor career. Like, what is the transition that prompted you to embrace that part of your life?
To shift into acting?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a breakup.
Wow.
It was I as a martial artist, I kind of emulated my teacher, who's like a modern day samurai from Japan.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I would I'd spend, when I was 16, I got my black belt at 16 in New York, and my teacher moved to Denver, Colorado, and I followed him out there. And I'd come back at the end, and we lived together in a studio apartment, shoulder to shoulder, sleeping on the floor, shoulder to shoulder, with two other guys who got their black belts at the same time as me. And I would come back from Colorado with a Japanese accent. And for about 2 weeks, my brother would, Gregory, you're American. You're not Japanese. Lose the accent.
Oh my God.
And I would often, in public, I would be very stoic.
Mm.
I remember going into a barbershop with friends one day, and the barber getting uncomfortable and like looking over and saying to my friends, "Does your friend ever smile?" And it's funny because I'm such a generally, you know, easygoing guy,
No.
but I went through a window for about 6 years when I wanted to just be, and in a way, it was my way of being invulnerable and avoiding feeling overwhelmed by some of the terror, fear, and sad and grief that I was experiencing during part of my childhood. And but there's a spiritual teacher that my wife, my beloved spiritual partner and wife, Wendy, she grew up with this particular spiritual teacher, and he has a really beautiful saying that seems appropriate to share here, which is he says, perfect vulnerability is perfect protection.
Wow.
But I hadn't gotten that idea yet. I at the time, through my martial arts, there was a part of me that thought, no, perfectly creating a body that's made of armor and holding my energy in a way that's armored, I thought that was perfect protection. But at a certain point, as a very feeling, empathic being, I had such a deep yearning to awaken and to be free of the burden of the weight that I carried, and in terms of emotional trauma. And so I went through a breakup, and I'd break into a theater at night at Columbia University, where I went to school. I'd sneak into the theater at night, and I would do, I was in my 20s, and I would do, there's a scene in Romeo and Juliet when the friar comes to tell Romeo that he's being banished, which means he'll never be able to see Juliet again.
Yeah.
And I had just broken up with this young woman who I loved very much. And all of a sudden, using the Romeo's words, I had an opportunity to cry and scream and just like completely lose control in a way that I didn't give myself permission in my personal life. But as an actor, I'm like, I've got carte blanche to express and explore absolutely anything. So that's how I got there.
Wow.
And then really found acting to be thoroughly delicious in terms of an exercise in empathy and getting to know different people's worlds by learning about the imaginary world of the script and the character, and all of that is such a joy for me, because I love people and I love connecting with people and learning about different cultures and professions and so on. But there was a point at 30, as I started to receive a measure of success, when these images and the shame started to show up, I through meditation, simply observing like thoughts showing up like out of a pond and observing them. I read a little booklet that suggested that if you were to drop a diamond ring into a pond, most people would go and try to like swim and get in, and it said, no, if you do that, you'll stir up the silt and it will make everything cloudy and you'll never find the ring. The thing to do is to sit and observe and get quiet. And in the quiet, the water will get really, really clear. And so I did that for about 6 months, sometimes a couple of hours a day, daily practice. And then I had a revelation to kind of wax Judeo-Christian tradition. I had a revelation, this idea that we're made in the spiritual image and likeness of God. And the place of shame, when I would blend with that part, I felt I had a conclusion. The part that was ashamed had a conclusion that I was bad, that I was faulty, that I was stained, that I was, there were all these very harsh self-judgments. But then in the stillness, it came to me that we are, all of us, made in the spiritual image and likeness of God. And if that's true, then I'm made of good stuff. And so it's not the hardware, but maybe it's like the software, maybe it's the programming. And so I was able to have enough space in my consciousness to recognize this is more conditioning and interpretation as distinct from who I am. And I began therapy, and that was, so I began, for 8 years, I saw a therapist, first once a week, then twice, then 3 times a week. After 8 years, I met my wife, and when we got pregnant, we have 2 beautiful daughters, Gabriella, who's 20, and Isabella, who's 14. And when we got pregnant with Gabriella, I was aware that as much as I had grown and felt like I had evolved in terms of a greater sense of integrity and availability to receiving love and sharing love and so on, that I had incompletes in terms of my childhood. And so with my eyes on being the best spiritual partner and husband, as well as being the best dad that I could be because we were pregnant. I started participating in some workshops, something called Insight Seminars, which is a kind of awakening wisdom program that was very valuable, is very valuable. And then a few months later, I began a master's degree in spiritual psychology. Yeah. So it's kind of been, and I've just, it's my like great joy and privilege to have the internal, external resources in different ways to have support in my own awakening process, and then to have a partner who has a similar education and sensibility to be in this together, and to be in a community where I connect with folks like you, other folks who are committed to awakening, and who are also committed to, it seems a natural thing that as we enjoy, I don't know exactly what it's like for you, but for me, it's like, as I enjoy the benefits of being more connected to my heart, more transparent, more available, then I like to share that goodness with other folks. I like to share the goodness of what that might be for them, for them to drop out of their ego patterns, their limiting patterns, restrictions, trauma, and so on, and experience more more of who they really are, more of who we really are, which is, I think, so much more than anything we can actually conceive of, or any of our interpretations or conclusions about ourselves or our world.
Wow, thank you so much. Because while I'm listening, because I knew your story already, but now it's just kind of like for you to reiterate all the little, different faces of your experience. I just feel like I'm watching the movie over again, of your life. And the fact I find it really fascinating is that from martial art background, since we're 13 years old, learning, that pushing, being tough, stern face, and then transitioning to like, wow, I get to use actor as an outlet to just express my emotions, right? And feel everything with that give you the permission to tap into vulnerability. But yet you start finding a different level of, with a spiritual psychology that makes you feel like it's another level of connection with who you are, source itself, right? And then that's like, it's so hard for me to describe, while listening to your story. It's like just so much masculinity, but from a more conventional way to looking at it, it's like, you need to be tough, you need to be disciplined, you need to make sure, you do the things right, or else you're gonna get punished and you face your repercussion, right? All the way to, I'm going to allow source to guide me because I'm part of this whole human experience. And this is like a full, I would say, death and rebirth, because we're transformational coach, right? And then we talk about, the evolution of allowing ourselves to facing the unknown, even like having this authenticity project, like with you, I'm feeling like, I don't know what I'm gonna say next, but allowing the next moment to guide my inspiration to just, just go deeper. And that really feels like an honoring to me, like in the next moment of what's gonna come up, like little moments. So this is such an inspiration. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Yeah. And another thing that just came up while I'm just kind of rambling right now is because I've seen your blog post talking about empathy versus sympathy, the difference between those. And here, Brene Brown's quote came in talking about, well, vulnerability is the birthplace for all that empathy, connection, creativity. And the thing is, because I know you're you've been leading workshops for men. It's called the embracing authenticity, embracing authentic masculinity, right?
Mhm.
And you are such a role model to really guide men through softening, into a more feminine way of connecting with themselves. And I want you to share a little bit more about how do you look at, helping others to embracing both sides of the energies, the masculine and the feminine, because we are so programmed and conditioned. Even me, I mean, my last name is Yang, right? Yang is like masculine. Jen, you needed to do this the right way. So I'm still a student and I'm still learning so much about like unraveling all my, little brain between years, how to allow my masculine and feminine to get along, in a healthy way. So please.
Yeah, you and me both. School,
We all are.
we're all, school is in session.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I guess the first thing I would say is that for me, I think everyone has their own interpretation of what feminine and masculine means.
Yeah.
And sometimes I see certain coaches using feminine synonymous with female and masculine synonymous with male, which is not how I relate to it. I relate to it in terms of energetics and what the connotation is. Many of the listeners may already, have this sensibility, so it may be, something they're already familiar with, but perhaps for some people it'll be new. So the way I relate to it is that the feminine and masculine have absolutely nothing to do with female or male. They don't have to, it's not about gender or sexual orientation. To me, it's about certain an energetic, and as you suggested, it's the synthesis of those energies, the yin and the yang. It's the synthesis in a balanced way that make for a healthy, mature, and since this is an authenticity project,
Yes.
an authentic human expression in an optimal way, at least the way I see it. So it's like even ideas of like one energy being more important than another. I sometimes like to think of a car battery has a positive and a negative. I don't know any cars that run with a battery that only has the positive or only has the negative.
That's a really good example. Yeah.
It's like they work together.
Yes.
So yeah, so for like the feminine for me is so beautiful, because the feminine is the, to me, has to do with the allowing, the receptive, has to do with listening, again, not a female or male thing, but anyone, male or female, who is listening, truly listening with the ears of their heart, holding a safe and honorable space. In that moment, they're leading with the feminine. I spend most of my time leading with the feminine. Simultaneously, the feminine also to me is so beautiful, because it's like the receptivity is also being receptive to, available to spirit's intuition, spirit's guidance, spiritual attunement, and so on. Even visioning, being inspired and then holding a vision, which is kind of like a pregnancy, when we get inspired and we go, I also work with a number of creative folks who are birthing projects. So in the course of their allowing themselves to tune into some sacred calling or something, a book, a record, you know, if for musicians, whatever that thing might be, it's like once they conceive, by allowing themselves to get in touch with what that thing is, all of a sudden they or we are with child. And during that pregnancy, there's so much of the feminine, of the nourishment, of the caring for, and then part of, as we move towards the actual delivery, then the delivery, to me, that's part of the masculine, of like taking steps. How do we deliver this baby? So the sacred nature of the feminine is holding the vision, holding the space, holding this divine utterance that's going from word and concept into manifestation, and then the masculine energy is more about, to me, the doing, the actual. So what's the next step to do? And yeah, so there is a synthesis of those things, and the challenge is many men, and much to my surprise, many women will buy into the notion that the feminine is overrated, and try to go more of a focus on the masculine energetic and become brittle or coarse, and will do things but somehow lose touch with compassion, with tenderness, with empathy. And we do it. I marvel at how often I speak to women oftentimes entrepreneurs or business women who've succeeded in one area of life in their business, but all of a sudden come to a point where there's all of a sudden a yearning for, I'm missing something. Well, I got to get this out of my head. Yeah. There's I think I may have shared this with you once, the Marilyn Monroe quote.
Yeah, I think you did.
Yeah. This idea I thought it was so funny, and it'd be funny in terms of consciousness. Let's quote Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
Of course. But Marilyn Monroe, I saw a quote attributed to her where she said, for the women in the world who are aspiring to be more like men are setting the bar far too low.
I needed to hear that 10 years ago. Then I'll have a quicker awakening.
I hear you. And then eventually you did. Eventually you did. And if I'm understanding correctly, you did by having your hearing taken away.
I am humbled. I am humbled. And that's the only way for me being like in this feminine body, yet, you know, masculinity took over in order for me to survive. So I feel like I can sustain myself with being strong and not being weak, you know? So that is, I know, ouch, right? But I didn't, I didn't feel the ouchness because I was numb, you know? I numbed myself out. I didn't allow myself to feel. And when you are not able to feel, what does that even mean by being empathetic? I couldn't feel. So you now link back to sympathy and empathy. I could be sympathetic, you know, I could be sympathetic. Yeah, you know, that looks pretty hard for you. But I wouldn't feel them. I wouldn't relate to the pain of the other person because I don't want to feel that myself. Do you see?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it takes a lot of courage to be empathic. It's so funny. My notions from when I was a kid to now in terms of what's actually strong or what's actually strength and power are so vastly different. You know, I think when I was a kid, I was like, you know,
yes.
But I'm constantly humbled by the courage that it takes for folks that I see in the world who are willing to be vulnerable, you know, who are willing to say, you know, this is like, it takes infinitely more courage to open and say, this is my pain.
Yes.
This
Sure.
is where it hurts.
Yes.
And I think in my earlier karate years, I'm still very connected to that community, but in my earlier years, it was like that, no. There's that thing of, you know, be strong, have a poker face, and move, and don't let anybody know that I'm hurting. But I'm my wife and I have been together for 23 years, and we're human. We have our moments of chafing when school is in session, but we recognize, thank God, we both have this orientation that the part of the purpose of our being together, that part of the purpose of relationship, is awakening. So if there's chafing going on, how beautiful! Like how that something is triggered, something is disturbed. That's an indicator that there's an owie that's surfaced, like an early Christmas present waiting to be opened. Doesn't always feel that way.
No.
But to go, here's an opportunity to be courageously transparent, to risk courageous transparency and say, so for example, can we talk? Can you hold the space? We set up time when something might happen. When we were talking earlier and you referenced I really felt like the 7-year-old in me got activated. And it was as if I was sitting in a room when X, Y, and Z happened. And can you hold for me while I process? And then there's different strategies for, you know, but to actually hold an intention, not to avoid being triggered and upset, but to hold an intention that if as a normal part of life, upset happens, to take it as, oh, school's in session, how are we going to hold? And then be transparent, first of all, with ourselves.
Yes.
As distinct from moving into like the ego pattern of destructive reactivity, blaming and you know, reactivity.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah, so while you're sharing this, another Brene Brown, I just have to quote her.
Yeah, she's awesome. I love Brene Brown.
Yeah, so I think she said, because this is authenticity project, so she said, in order to be authentic, say, if you are trying to be authentic, not even saying try, being authentic, we really need to cultivate the courage to, I don't remember exact the wordings, but cultivate courage of showing up with imperfection and vulnerability, right? And imperfection, I think that hit my heart for sure, because, you know, you have to make sure you manage things well. That thing has been pretty much, you know, dominating my previous life, in this life, you know? So allow ourselves to be imperfect. That's like, wow, are you going to take my life away? Because we are also trained in a way that we need to be safe. In order to be safe, we need to make sure things are as perfect as it seems, or as perfect as it feels. And it's just facade. It's all facade, you know? And not till this path we've been walking on, it's really humbling to the point, like, it's okay to not feeling okay. It's okay to not even feeling like you have to get it all together. Like, just right before our video, like, start recording. We're like, oh, do we have to do something? We don't. We just
Yeah.
ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Such liberation. But at the same time, it risks our ego of saying, are you sure it's going to be okay? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Thank you. So, I so appreciate you for sharing vulnerability, as I think this is part of the being feminine, because vulnerability wouldn't exist if we don't stop and listen, so we can feel. So we can feel the depth of this moment, because if we are not able to connect with the moment right now, how do we do vulnerability?
Yeah, it in a way, it's not something that we do, at least.
Yeah, it's not
I mean, it's not a doing thing. And it's like,
be vulnerable.
and I have a, it's so funny you moved to where you moved just in the moment. I was thinking it would be nice if you're open to it, just for a few seconds, just to not do anything, but just to be present with each other. Yeah. There's a poet, John O'Donohue, and he did and that was just a small taste of that, and just savoring the connection, which was so sweet for me. And and I'm reminded, John O'Donohue, while doing a poetry retreat, I heard this lovely story where, so he had however many, say 20 young people gathering for a poetry, like a 3-day workshop. And his poetry is often very spiritual and insightful and wisdom rich. And also he's a craftsman in terms of being a poet. But he came in, he sat down, and my understanding is he took 5 to 10 minutes where he didn't say a word. He just essentially soul gazed with each member of the group, moving eye contact to eye contact and being present. And when he was complete with that moment, my understanding is he said, that's all I have to offer. And that's really all any of us have to offer each other, is our willingness to be present. And it's something, it moves me deeply, because it's something on a fundamental level that I crave so much in my own life. My own willingness to be present, to truly be present, and to connect with folks who are available to truly being present. And yeah, and then I imagine he got around to the craft of the poetry writing. But I think in terms of consciousness work, in many ways, that's what we're doing, is we're on a fundamental level. I think there's a big misunderstanding about, like a fundamental misunderstanding that many of us buy into with early childhood trauma and dancing with being human, which is some variation of buying into the notion that we are not inherently beloved. And so we spend, so the masculine energetic, the doing part, the part that is about doing, in a way, buying into this misinterpretation because we weren't met at some point or received in the loving, affirming, unconditional way we craved, that the ego strategy awakens this seeking of outside validation by doing all kinds of things, failing to recognize that our beloved nature or our inherent worthiness is not an outside phenomenon. So we're out chasing, doing, I'll be the vice president, I'll be the president, I'll win an Academy Award, I'll do this, I'll do, all of the different things that we can come up with that I'll do. And then mom and dad will know that I'm really valuable. And then the world will see, and it's all the land of illusion because we're missing the fundamental thing. To go back to what I said at the beginning of my first insight of, well, if each of us is made in the spiritual image and likeness of God, there's nothing to do. It's like, then we are already, it is our nature that we are beloved. We're made of divine stuff. And I find the more I can move into residing in that place, while also recognizing I'm also human, I'm having a human experience, I'm called to do certain things, I'm called to provide for my family, or to be a vehicle through which God can provide for my family, and so on. While there's a balance of doing, there's a sweetness that just transcends anything, to just reside in the being, to reside, as I'm taught in spiritual psychology, the language would be like to reside in the loving, to be in the loving.
Wow.
And then only because I know this is going to be shared. Like, I feel like you and I are just chatting, but I know it's going to be shared. I would add, I want to be sensitive to time. May I add a quote?
Yes, please.
So, so in spiritual psychology, one of the quotes that's sometimes leveraged, Rumi, the Sufi poet Rumi, is often leveraged, and Rumi, there's so many. The one that's coming to mind is, our task is not to search the world for love, but rather to identify the barriers that we've placed inside of us, that we've placed against it. And then in spiritual psychology, what is offered by Doctors Ron and Mary Hulnick, they offer, and as an addition to that, and then dissolve them. And the dissolving of the barriers themselves are these ego constructs, the judgments, the misinterpretations, the againstness, the condemnation, that when we judge ourselves, we negatively compare and contrast ourselves with another, or we negatively compare and contrast ourselves with our own idealized version of ourselves, and so on. And at the heart of all of that is, as soon as we move into judgment, we kick ourselves out of the Garden of Eden, or we kick ourselves out of the loving. And then we have the choice, either through some form of forgiveness or simply extending empathy and compassion to the places inside that hurt, and also to the protective parts that are going, that are being reactive and doing the things, maybe I'll do, well, all the different strategies to cover the hurt, to extend empathy and compassion and gratitude, to dissolve those things that become barriers, so that we can come back. At least this is my experience inside my own consciousness and the folks that I serve, and what I've observed in human behavior thus far is like, I've also gone into the prison system for the last 10 years, participated with a team of folks working with many people in men's prison and women's prison who've been in 25 years for sometimes multiple life sentences. And it's the same thing. It's like there's a dissolving of the cell bars in my own consciousness, in their consciousness, those things that will otherwise limit us from living a life that is in the loving, and that then allows us, starting in relationship to our own self and starting in relationship to our younger parts and all of our parts, the multiplicity of parts that make each of us up, a relationship of loving, of honoring, of empathy. And then we get to share that as part of our overflow with our boyfriend, our girlfriend, our children, our colleagues, and so on. And so it's this thing that we're in, each of us in our own way, but with lots of overlap. It's such a yummy thing, you know, because it's just good, because we're in the business of amplifying, to me, like amplifying attunement to the blessing that we're here in the first place.
Gregory, I'm so grateful for this conversation. You know, just from the point you invited me to say, okay, let's just get still and just feel each other's presence. And that part really, I felt it. I really felt it. And it really moved me, even though we didn't do anything.
Funny that.
That's a magical moment, you know? I mean, the moment of, are we willing to just slow everything down? You know, and slowing everything down takes courage, especially for the world we are in right now, right?
Yeah.
Are we willing to just not do anything literally? Because when we do, it's like, for example, it's so easy for me to get into that fantasy world of what could happen if we do certain things, you know, being a human about it. But when we're here and recognizing that, wow, me having this beautiful conversation with Gregory right now, while I'm breathing, while I'm still alive, like the moment I feel I'm alive, so much gratitude, so much gratitude. Yeah. And yeah, you know, and then when you're saying being is loving, and I felt the love, the love, I feel that love, you know? So this is an authenticity project. And I'm so grateful to have you to demonstrate like how it feels in the, not only the body, but how we relate to each other through the beingness. And sometimes beingness, you know, you can spell it, but do you really get what it means? You know, you have to feel that resonance, you know. And sometimes I feel like it's just beyond words for me to even describe it. So I think my last question I would love to have you to give you wisdom on is, see, we're all in different way of portraying or, you know, conveying our messages in our own authentic ways, or, you know, the expression is multiple, right? I mean, people, they show up in their own way of authenticity, and there's no one way. You have your way of showing authenticity, I have my own way of showing authenticity, and we appreciate all different ways of showing authenticity. So what is one thing that you would love to share, a simple practice for people who are listening, that they would love to really get into that energetic of, because authenticity is an energetic presence, energetic signature of how we express ourselves. So what's one practice that intuitively at this moment right now, if you have one,
Sure.
share that if they really want to tap into that deeper part of feels authentic to me, like it's in the core, I know, I feel that.
Sure.
I don't know if it's too complicated to word it.
No, no.
Yeah.
I'm just checking inside. I would go really, it's been practiced in India and China and different places around the world for thousands of years. There's so much wisdom in going to the breath. One of the things I like is because there's not even words that are necessary, but just like I would invite folks to allow their eyelids to close and breathe deep to the belly and be attuned to the breath. Even just simply being present with the breath. And rather than taking in a breath, allowing oneself to be filled. We can breathe. In reality, I think it's more accurate to allow ourselves to be breathed.
To be breathed.
To be breathed.
Yeah.
So there's one less thing we need to do. That we're not going to breathe. We're going to allow ourselves to be breathed. And when we're full, our body in its infinite wisdom will guide us, prompt us to now allow ourselves to release the breath. And when we're empty, we will naturally, through the benevolence of the universe, again, be breathed. So in this moment, I'm just feeling into like the naturalness of how good the universe is, that without any efforting at all, we're sustained by the breath. We can call it the breath of life, the breath of God. It doesn't elude me that inspiration is another word for breathing, for breath. And so, yeah, if I were to add anything else to it, it would be just a simple prayer of thank you. You know, independent of what one's spiritual belief, it's not dogmatic. If someone has an image, whether it's Allah or whether it's Jesus or whether it's one's mom or one's dad or one's child or that presence of life that breathes us itself, simply saying thank you, like that brings me more present in my heart, in the present moment. Yeah.
Again, thank you so much, Gregory. This is a beautiful present for anyone who's watching, you know. Yeah, I'm receiving it and you're the channeler of that. And I'm sure you feel that yourself too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for your sweetness of spirit. Thank you for your radiance. You know, you carry with you a great light and a great warmth, and you hold a very sweet, inviting space. And each of our conversations is characterized for me with upliftment and nourishment. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Gregory. So honored to have you here and share your wisdom, because you are someone who really walks his talk with deep integrity. And I'm so touched by that. I'm still learning, and you're definitely a wisdom teacher.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
So for anyone who wants to know your work, how would you recommend them to follow you?
Oh, sure. Thank you. GregoryVahanian.com, or sometimes you need to do the www. I'm getting that straightened out.
Oh, wow.
But yeah. I don't know. The SSL thing, I don't know. We're in process with that. But in any event, it's GregoryVahanian.com. If it doesn't come up right away, you can do the W's before. And then that's my website. And then Gregory Vahanian Coaching. I regularly post videos and articles on my coaching page. And there's one, and I recently began on Instagram.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I can be found just Gregory Vahanian on Instagram. It reminds me of a casting director who I adore, who does a lot of big movies, the Star Trek movies and other things. And I think around 2000, I got my first computer in 2000, and I shared with her that I had a computer and that we could do email now because we have a friendly rapport. And she's like, "That's amazing. Congratulations. Welcome to the 80s.
80s.
So like, I just got on Instagram. It's 2022. I think my 20-year-old has been on Instagram for 5 years. I'm catching up.
Oh, same here. I still feel like I'm a baby on social media, so we do it together.
Yes, good.
Yeah, so people, this is beautiful gentleman, Gregory Vahanian, and he has so much wisdom, and as you can see and feel his presence, learning so much about, his deep devotion for not only self, but also for, cultivating beingness. That's that real love for the surroundings and also for the world. So follow him, and he has a lot to share on his, I think, Facebook page, Instagram too. So Gregory, thank you so much for being here, and
thank you,
can't wait to see what's going to blossom from your beingness.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.